Hi everyone, my name is Emily and I'm the young adult librarian at the Rock Island Public Library, and today I have a book for you that I enjoyed this fall, and it is called Cemetery Boys. And in this book you meet a guy named Yadriel. Yadriel is in high school and he is dealing with the fact that less than a year, this is important, less than a year ago his mom passed away. She died suddenly in a car accident. And this was really tough. I mean, this was his mom, but she was also Yadriel's kind of greatest ally within their family because Yadriel is trans and he comes from this traditional family of brujos and brujas. So what this means, if you are born, if you are seen as being, okay, you're a woman, you are going to inherit the family's healing abilities. Brujas have the ability to heal injuries. And this power has sort of weakened a little bit over many, many generations. Like centuries ago, you could go so far as to bring someone back from the dead, or the brink of death at least. But now, for example, when Yadriel's mom was in this car accident, she couldn't heal herself. That would, healing anyway takes your life force. It can really drain you. And so she couldn't use her power on herself. That was how she died in that accident. But brujas, that's the healing side of the family. So the women in the family can heal. Brujos, they have the ability to communicate with the dead. Like the whole family can see the dead and speak to them. But if you're a brujo, you also have the ability to sever the dead's connection to the world of the living. You can send them onto the afterlife. And usually this is done, you try and do it willingly. Like you try to have a discussion with this person. Sometimes it happens if a spirit goes maligno. That means that they've kind of stayed in the world of the living for too long and they've sort of lost who they were, and their spirit becomes just this sort of potentially violent, dangerous burst of energy. Like the person is gone, the essence of them has moved on to the afterlife, but this echo is something that you need to, sever what ties them to this world and get them to move on, because they can potentially harm the living. So Yadriel has known for years that he's not a bruja, he's a brujo. But with his mom gone especially, his family, they just don't know how to handle this. They think, well, you were born a girl and we don't know, they think this hasn't happened before. But at one point in the book somebody points out, okay, in all the generations of our family, there absolutely have been people who have had different experiences than just the strict gender binary. This isn't the first time this has happened. We just don't know what happened in the past. But for Yadriel, he knows that, all right, I'm gonna prove myself as a brujo. He hasn't had a quinces, which traditionally would celebrate a young person joining the adults in the family, coming into their full power. But because Yadriel is trans, he did not have a quinces. And so what happens at the start of this book is he and his cousin Maritza, they go out to the old cemetery, actually the old church, the cemetery that Yadriel lives right by. This is something that the family protects. They keep the cemetery, they patrol it because they are dealing with the dead. They communicate with the dead, and they're kind of keeping an eye on things, making sure that the dead pass on when they need to. They can help sever someone's tether. Wow, words are hard. They can help sever someone's tether to this world if necessary, if the person needs help moving on. So Maritza, her dad, is the person who forges portajes. Portajes vary, again, by gender. So for women in the family, this is usually like a string of rosary beads. And this is, often in this vessel, there'll be, it's not just a rosary. There'll be something holding some chicken blood, because for healing, you do need some blood. And usually you don't want to use human blood. That's too powerful. You don't want to mess with that. But for guys, the men in the family, their portajes are usually daggers, because this is what they use to sever this connection, to get a spirit to pass on, if that is not happening just on its own. And so Yadriel, he and Maritza go to the old church and they stand before the statue of Lady Death. There's one in the newer church that's closer to where the family lives. But out in the old church, the understanding is, okay, it's just us. Nobody's going to see this happen. We're going to just do the ceremony before Lady Death. And Yadriel understands, all right, I'm going to present myself as the person I am. I'm saying to Lady Death, this is who I am, and I want to serve you, for my whole life as a brujo. And to do this, he has to take his portaje, this dagger that was forged by his cousin Maritza, takes his new portaje, and he has to cut his tongue, just a little, just very small cut, and make sure some of his blood goes into this vessel. This is like one of the only times you would use human blood, just in this ceremony, identifying yourself. So, after the blood drips into the vessel, the flame flares up, and Yadriel's portaje starts to glow with this golden light. And that means that Lady Death has accepted him. This is him starting to have his full abilities. He's now a Brujo, officially. So, Yadriel and Maritza, they're really excited. This is exactly what they wanted to have happen. This is perfect. The ceremony was a success. But almost as soon as it's done, both of them feel this terrible stabbing pain in their chests. And this is another thing. In this family, if someone dies, everybody feels it. And if it's an older person, if it's, sort of a gradual death from illness, then this feeling isn't quite so sharp or painful. It can be sort of a relief almost if somebody had been suffering. But this was sudden, this was painful. And when they go back out to the cemetery, they find everyone searching for their cousin Miguel. And Miguel was in the cemetery that night. Okay, while this was going on, while Yadriel and Maritza were doing their ceremony in the old church, Miguel was just kind of doing his rounds. He was just there, and even though everybody felt him suddenly and violently die, they can't find his body. His body is nowhere to be found. So this is alarming. Luckily, we're just a few days out from Dia de Muertos, and so everybody feels like, well, we're gonna keep searching, obviously, but if we can't find Miguel before Dia de Muertos, we can at least have him, when the whole family comes back, because everybody comes back for Dia de Muertos. All the deceased members of the family return for a couple days, and he can tell us how he died. He can tell us what happened in spirit form, but we would really like to figure this out before that. So Yadriel, he wants to help out, but his dad is just like, no. He kind of says a cruel thing. He tells Yadriel to stay with the women, and that's not fair because Yadriel is not a woman, but basically, this leads Yadriel to feel like, all right, I have to prove myself. I've already done the ceremony before Lady Death. Lady Death knows who I am, so now I need to show the rest of my family. So he and Maritza start looking, they make their way back to the old church because Yadriel is thinking, if I can summon Miguel, then everybody will know that I am a Brujo, and he can explain what happened to him. He can explain how he died. This creepy thing that has happened, this terrible tragedy for our family. At least we can get some closure and learn how Miguel died. So they go in the old church and they find this medallion. And Maritza, Yadriel, they're not sure if this belonged to Miguel, but sure enough, it is a tether. This is an object that is linking a spirit to this world. And so Yadriel is able to use his portaje to get the spirit that is attached to the tether, to the medallion, to appear. Well, it's not Miguel. Unfortunately, this is a different spirit. This is the spirit of a guy who actually goes to Yadriel and Maritza's school. This is a guy named Julian. And Julian is surprised because he didn't know he was dead. He was just out with some friends that same night, and there was like a weird guy in the shadows kind of jumped one of his friends, so Julian tried to, defend his friend. There was a scuffle, and now, Julian's here. He's in this old church, and he doesn't know how he got there. He doesn't remember what has happened, but, he's in spirit form. He can't interact with objects. He has died, but he doesn't know how. And again, when Yadriel and Maritza start looking around, they don't find a body. So the issue in this book is Yadriel trying to figure out what is happening. He is ready to release Julian to the afterlife, but Julian's spirit is not ready to go because he wants to know how he died. He wants to check on his friends and his brother before he goes to the other side. And so this becomes a thing where they're going to have to work together. Julian's spirit is staying with Yadriel. It's like, okay, you're gonna stick close by because they're trying to figure out how he died, and maybe it's connected to Miguel's death. Because again, Miguel's spirit hasn't shown up yet. And so Yadriel's kind of confused, like, well, why is Julian's spirit here? Like, we in both cases, there's no body, but at least we have one person in spirit form that can kind of talk to us and help us try and figure out what's going on. And also, the idea here is, as the story goes on and Yadriel and Julian become closer, Yadriel starts to feel like, okay, well, I'm really gonna miss this person. Like, I know he's dead, but I'm gonna have a hard time saying goodbye when it's time. And the whole book is leading up to Dia de Muertos, and that is going to be a big night for the family because the dead are going to come back. But there's also something else going on. There is somebody who perhaps is using the people who have died suddenly, and there have been other disappearances in the area, we come to find out as the book goes on. Someone is doing something else. Somebody has a plan involving the recently dead, these people who suddenly have died, and that's why the bodies can't be found. And so Yadriel and Maritza and Julian are going to have to work together to stop this person and what they have planned for the night of Dia de Muertos. So if you like fantasy, I really love this book. I love the romance between Yadriel and Julian. Like, as the book goes on, these two are getting closer and getting to know each other. And it's just a very sweet story of Yadriel ultimately being accepted by his family. You know, his father recognizing, oh, I was wrong. I'm sorry. You are a Brujo. That is who you are. And like, we just because you're different, I still, you know, you're my son. I can accept that and finally see you as the person you are. So that's really a beautiful moment for Yadriel. And he understands, you know, as the book is kind of winding down, okay, just Dad making this speech to the others in the family, this is just the beginning. You know, this isn't the end of this story. We're going to have to do better as a family, recognizing that the gender binary is not something that is real, even though our powers have historically manifested this way. You know, there have always been people like me, and there always will be. So if you like fantasy, check this book out. This was the first novel by Aiden Thomas, and he's got several other YA titles out now. And thank you for watching. I will see you again soon.